And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Sunday, March 9th, 2025. And on this Sunday, we're going to set up things in that we have low pressure out in the central Bering. There's a front that comes across, pushing up into the southwest mainland and then extending with a secondary low in the western Gulf. We're also going to have some moisture pulling up into the southern panhandle. There is a winter weather advisory in effect for late this Sunday night into Monday morning. And then we have a winter weather advisory for St. Lawrence Island that will continue as we go through this Sunday afternoon and into late Sunday night because of light snow and blowing snow. Here, southern parts of the panhandle could pick up a sloppy 2 to maybe as much as 4 or 5 inches of snow, especially as you get up in elevation. But overall, we find IFR conditions Monday morning across the inner coastal mountains of the panhandle up toward, say, Hyder and Wrangell, and then up here along the Alaska-Canadian border, up there around the upper Tanana Valley, perhaps some IFR conditions, and then here along the west arm of the Alaska Range, back out along the lower Yukon Delta through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence and St. Matthew. For Monday afternoon, we find still some IFR conditions up against the intercoastal mountains there along British Columbia and the lower southern parts of the Panhandle, otherwise MVFR. Pretty widespread there in the southeast, and then across much of the southwest along and west of the Alaska Range we have MVFR conditions, the lower portion of the Yukon and much of the Kuskokwim Basin, and then back out here toward St. Lawrence we have still IFR conditions prevailing. And then for Tuesday morning, IFR conditions expand a bit with the overnight cooling and lingering moisture there. We have IFR conditions across the southwest parts of the western Seward Peninsula, down through Nunavik Island, back to St. Matthew. IFR conditions along the intercoastal mountains there of the Panhandle, British Columbia for Tuesday morning. And then as we get into Tuesday afternoon, conditions should begin to improve across much of the Panhandle with VFR conditions emerging there over southern and central areas. We could have pocket of IFR conditions around McCarthy, Wrangell, St. Elias Mountains there in the southeast Tuesday afternoon, and then upward along areas of the Chukchi Sea coast. We expect some IFR conditions to develop Tuesday afternoon between Point Lay and Point Hope. So for the passes on Monday, Anaktuvik and Adigan passes there in the east central Brooks Range, VFR conditions will be the rule. As we drop down along west arm of the Alaska Range, still getting some upslope flow and moisture, so IFR there in the morning at Lake Clark and Merrill becoming MVFR. Same thing, Rainy Pass, IFR conditions, then MVFR. Windy Pass, looking at MVFR early Monday, giving way to VFR conditions. And then Isabel Pass should generally be within VFR conditions on Monday, but to the west of there, in through the Alaska Range, we expect MVFR conditions to prevail. And Mentasta Pass should generally stay MVFR during the day on Monday. Dropping down across the Copper River Basin, Tanita Pass, MVFR, and then Portage Pass also, we expect MVFR conditions throughout Portage Pass into Prince William Sound on Monday. For the northern end of the Panhandle, Chilkoot and White, IFR to start early Monday, giving way to MVFR conditions. And looking at the freezing levels at the surface Monday morning, they extend from the central Bering to just south of St. Matthew, coming inland there around Bristol Bay, and then up along into Lower Cook Inlet along the eastern Kenai, along the northern Gulf Coast, and then in through the inner channels of the Panhandle. Freezing levels aloft, there's not a whole lot of warm air. There's only at or just above 2,000 feet as you get down toward Haida Gwaii. Otherwise, much of the state just cooler temperatures. We are expecting overall surface temperatures to cool or trend a bit cooler than normal here as we head into and through the middle of March. As far as icing and the remnant moisture along frontal boundaries associated with some of the lows, as well as where you have the clouds that are producing precipitation, we find some moderate icing possible over the northern Gulf from Prince William Sound out into areas, especially southern Panhandle on Monday above 4,000 feet. Back to the west, Bering Strait, pockets in toward the middle Yukon, maybe above 4,000 feet as well, and then an broader area of moderate icing expected back out toward the southwestern central portions of the Bering Sea above 4,000 feet. Upper level jet stream winds, there's just this broad general troughiness over the mainland. So the main jet core winds are behind me here. We have winds, a jet core upwards of 145 knots running along and just south of the western and central Aleutians. As we bring it down to 9,000 feet, 700 millibars, still relatively light winds over the mainland, though there are some stronger winds coming up into British Columbia, that area east of Haida Gwaii and to the north of Vancouver Island. Behind me, a broad belt of winds running along the lower Bering Sea and especially south of the Aleutians, ranging anywhere from around 45 to 60 knots out of the northwest. And then you can see that low circulation sitting here over the eastern southeast Bering. That's drifting slowly eastward. Strongest winds associated with this feature we have over the central eastern Aleutians, winds of 50 to 60 knots out of the northwest. Elsewhere, there are some pockets of stronger winds along the northern Gulf Coast off of Kaktovik. So as we bring in and look at where the potential for turbulence is during the day on Monday, all along the Gulf Coast from eastern Kenai, Prince William Sound, all the way into especially central southern Panhandle, right surface to 5,000 or 6,000 feet here along the Gulf Coast, also areas of eastern Kodiak Island, entrance of Cook Inlet. As we go inland, there is an area up there just north of the middle Yukon, south slopes of the Brooks Range, surface to 4,000 feet. And then as we look out along the Alaska Peninsula and trailing out into the Aleutians, the greatest threat for turbulence, widespread moderate turbulence with perhaps isolated severe turbulence, especially over the central portion of the Aleutians on Monday, surface to 4,000 feet.